morning, and welcome to the BCS Edinburgh branch meeting. I'm really happy to have Jen Krieger from GitHub talking tonight about The Future Looks Different, and that's her first slide that you see. Before I introduce Jen, I just want to go through a few bookkeeping activities. First thing to understand is that this session is being recorded, so if you're not happy with being recorded, even though you're not visible and you're not allowed to say anything, now's the right time to leave. So you are on mute at the moment. At the end of Jen's session, I'll be inviting people to ask questions, either through the question panel, which you'll see on your dashboard, or by raising your hand. I prefer the question panel because then all the questions go in the same place. At that point, I will enable you to unmute, and I will ask for you by name to unmute yourself and ask your question to Jen. Jen has also said that she's happy to take to interact with you during the presentation by using the chat panel. So if you would like to respond live to something that Jen is talking about, then please respond in the chat panel. And Jen has just said hi in the chat panel, and I encourage you to say hi back. That will at least demonstrate that you can hear me and that the system is working after a fashion. So apart from the fact that we're being recorded and that you're going to be asking questions through the question panel, I think it's time to get started. So Jen and I first met working on the Agile conference in the US. We've worked on a few things over the years, and I've been very happy to see her move from a position at Red Hat where she was hugely influential to a position where she's going to be even more influential at GitHub, which is a web property that is becoming more and more influential every day, not only due to the fact that they've hired Jen, but one of the things that Jen has noticed over the years is that things keep changing, and so I'm really excited to be able to welcome her today to tell us about her top tips about how to cope with a changing future. So Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Seb. I really appreciate that. I'm very thankful to be able to speak with you all today. And as Seb was saying, it's really strange to do presentations when I can't see everybody else online. And so I use that whole concept of chat to feel like at least I'm not speaking to no one. So if you want to interact with me, I really encourage you to go for it in the chat window. And so really, when this talk first became an idea in my head, I was in a moment of career crisis myself, thinking about what I wanted to do next and how I wanted to approach the things that basically, like, what did I want to do with the rest of my career? I'm not young. I've been in tech for about 25 years now, and I didn't want to just kind of fly into the night without really any final impact in my career. And so coming to that moment of trying to figure out what I wanted to do kind of set me up for thinking about this talk in general, and as it relates to the tech industry as well. And so adapting to change is often really hard for us as humans. I know this very specifically well. For those of you who are paying attention to tech news this morning, GitHub announced another very large change for us. And as you might imagine, folks are both happy and sad, and folks respond to change in different ways depending on where they are. And how the events of the past year have really impacted them. And the problem with this is that change is unfortunately the thing that will surround us all the time, daily at work, and there's no way that we can get away from it. Not only is it hard for us to keep up and stay motivated, so much is changing so quickly in tech that it also can be very hard to understand what to focus on. I've talked to very senior engineers in open source about the fact that they cannot keep up with all the new tech coming out. When Docker and Kubernetes started happening, I mean, I don't know any one expert who could keep up with all of that technology and be expert in it. And so, you know, it doesn't matter who you are or what level at your career is, it's really hard to know what the focus should be. And really, honestly, the only thing certain in the tech industry is that we should expect the pace of change to continue to accelerate. And so my question to all of you is, are you ready for it? Now, how did I get to where I am today? Just a few short years ago, I was a junior project manager in a very small financial firm that definitely did not consider tech their core business. They considered making money off of real estate their core business. And I was in a support function for the software, the financial modeling software that they were using to make decisions on what to invest in. I definitely was not learning much about building software. I was definitely just going through the motions. We had an expected cadence and no one was challenging it, and it was really slow. It's really honestly surreal to me today that I am working for essentially what's my dream company in an extremely strategic role that has a lot of responsibility, but it's also the right level of challenge for me and fun in order to make it worth my time. And honestly, this is the first time I can really say that I look forward to going to this job every day. I don't have a formula or some easy trick to recreate what I did. Much of what I learned was through trial and error. And quite frankly, I made a lot of mistakes. And I received a lot of feedback from folks that I looked up to on those mistakes, and also a lot of feedback from people that I didn't necessarily care for. And so it's really hard to kind of figure out what to actually pay attention to. So what does make career advice good? And like by show of hands in chat, I'd love to know, has anybody heard any of this career advice before? You know, dress for the job you want. Remember a job that remember a job doesn't give meaning in your life. Work harder than those around you. All of these things are extremely generic. And I think that when I hear generic advice, I think immediately, well, okay, how does that actually really apply to me or the situation I'm in? Or how does it apply to you and the situation you are in? Any one of us can do an internet search and easily pull up thousands of these really generic career advice quotes. The reality advice like this is oftentimes it's highly contextual and definitely can be problematic depending on what point in time you're actually reading it. Let's take the first one. So what job do you want? How do you want to dress up? Like until you have that job. So right before this session, I told Sab I was changing out of my pajamas. And I assure you, when I was younger, there was absolutely no way that I thought, certainly in my 20s, that the job that I was going to be dressing for would be a PJ OK job. I definitely thought I was going to be wearing a suit with nylons and high heels for the rest of my career. And I assure you that previous mentors I've had in my career, if they knew I was sitting at home in a t-shirt and wearing some sweatpants, they would probably have said, yeah, you're not doing enough to be professional. But here I am. I mean, I'm living proof of the fact that I can sit in an office like this and still expect to sit in a role of leadership. The second one, I'm pretty sure that there are people on this planet who do jobs that do indeed give their lives meaning. My friend Kelly, who works with young cancer patients, and my friend Allison, who worked for the Peace Corps for years. Jobs can and do define who you are. And I am here to tell you it's okay. They shape you and they teach you how to level up, and they do give you meaning. And finally, the last one, work harder than those around you. So it's pretty much a conflict with the other piece of generic advice, which is be a team player. And so if you are working harder than those of you around you, you're probably not being a team player, and the people that are around you probably do not view you as a team player. So where does that leave us? In the past 20 years, I've watched teams rip out, pave over, and generally make technology countless times. There's always something new, something better, something rethought. I am assured that all of you have seen this or have heard stories to this case in the past. I've also watched this happen to many people's careers. Talking very specifically about the testing industry, when I first started in tech, testing was very manual. There were no one I knew was doing automated testing. And when we started talking about automated testing, it was primarily in the form of what software as a service tool could we purchase to clip on top of .NET to help us test. Welcome to the life of working from home. Here is one of my cats. And And so because of that, when I look back at that, and when I was thinking about that kind of environment back then, thinking about what was preventing us from accelerating change, preventing us from accelerating the deployment of our software, manual testing was one of those things. Makes absolute sense to me that it was one of the first things that we then automated in the industry and are now pushing on different, the role has fundamentally changed. It's now about automation, and the manual testing then becomes in more exploratory testing. It's more about using your brain to think about what might a user do versus automatically knowing what they're going to do and automating for that case. Project management has changed. Business analysis has changed. Product management has changed. All of these industries are learning, and quite frankly, some faster than others, to adapt to changing environments and companies' needs. So there's no playbook for this, folks. I'm not going to give you any list of hot technologies you should invest in, or say some sort of shocking thing like all tech jobs will be eventually replaced by robots. But I'm pretty sure they're going to. It's just a matter of time. The reason I will not tell you these things is because I don't know them, but also I'm going to be wrong. When I was younger, I was told by a mentor that business analysis, in those days, the act of writing, the 60-page requirements documents that were then signed off in blood, I was told that was the future, and that's where I should have focused my career, and that it would be an amazing career for somebody like me with the observation skills I had. Today, I observe that the business analysis that I did when I was a younger person has definitely morphed. It's not there in modern companies that I have worked for. Folks are no longer writing those 60-page requirements documents, and if they are, it's probably in an environment where there is not much trust. I see this role, especially the folks who I've been friends with for the years, they're now doing things like custom reporting, so they're more in business intelligence. They're more doing data analysis of large, complex data sets. They're deep into the details of understanding how data should interact with other data. And I even saw many of my colleagues find their passion in machine learning and AI technologies, and a lot of them are product managers today, product owners, but they're not business analysts. And the problem with the pace of this industry is that if we take the time to become unfocused with what's happening or less than informed of how things are changing around us, we're going to become lost. I've been lost so many times in my career, some good stories with positive outcomes and others, well, not so good. I've defined my career in 3 stages, and I have some stories to tell you. And I hope that matching these stories with advice that I'd wish I had listened to before I made the mistakes that I did will help you also avoid some of the mistakes that you might be facing, or maybe even help you think about something differently for your career. And I'm hoping that by giving you these stories and giving you this advice, that you'll be able to attach it to your own context and really understand how to use this advice for yourself instead of the be a team player, which, by the way, is the worst advice I've ever gotten in my career. So here's my first truth. I did not learn early on that the world did not revolve around me. How about you? My father raised me to speak my mind, and this is how I showed up at work, with a lot of candor. Early in my career, it got me into a lot of trouble, as you might imagine, working for a financial firm in a non-tech industry. I definitely did not want to be heard. I got my fair share of warnings for how I spoke to people, and I took that feedback poorly. The industry I was in was definitely not ready for my transparency and openness, and emotionally speaking, I was still young, and I was absolutely not ready for the backlash of how people responded to what I was saying and thinking. I had wished, and looking back, I do wish that I had been the person who saw the value in working on myself when I was younger. I wish that I had felt safe to ask for help. Just like my dad raised me to speak my mind, he also raised me to be independent and definitely not rely on anybody but myself. And because of that strong outer shell and the fact that I was extremely painfully shy when I was younger, the emotional ramification of that is that I felt left out when I was younger. That definitely doesn't help me, or didn't help me want to reach out to people and ask them for feedback. It just sounded like harsh criticism, and I often responded in anger. I tended to excel by doing a lot of extra work on my own. So definitely wasn't a team player. I used my technical skills to automate what I was doing, And I was able to do that much more than my coworkers. So remember, I was independent. I didn't need folks to tell me how to do my job, nor did I need friends at work, that's for sure. This needless alienation between myself and the people that I worked with, it wasn't necessary. I didn't learn how to be part of a team or help others grow and learn as well. And I wish I had spent more time, being curious about others. I wish I had learned to ask better questions when I was younger. And I wish I had learned from others rather than scorn them, rather than dismiss their opinions. And finally, because I didn't really have a professional connection really with anyone, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Note, I still do not. If you don't know who you want to be when you grow up, I highly encourage you to put a yes in chat as well, because frankly, even nearing 50, I do not know where I'm going. I kind of have a guess, but I'm not entirely sure. And so 1 year during our annual review cycle, I asked my boss what I needed to do to qualify for a promotion. What goals should I have? It's a pretty standard question, and you should expect an answer, right? So he told me I needed a higher education. And so, like the good employee I was, I heard get an MBA, and that would help me get promoted. So 36 months of night classes. Well, guess what? Do you think that resulted in me getting promoted? Well, I'm sorry to say that was not the case. I realized the very hard way that I should have asked myself if getting an MBA was the right thing for me to do at the time. A wise person asked me once when I mentioned being interested in getting a PhD, do you want the letters or the knowledge? And honestly, I wish someone had asked me that question before I signed up for 36 months of very painful learning. And while I'm very glad I have the degree now, I barely remember anything I learned back then because I didn't actually apply it to anything I was doing. So how do I write my career goals? My friend Kelly Sue started this game ages ago. It was when I was barely out of college, where every year we would write down X number of things we wanted to do or accomplish in the year, and where the number of things were tied to the year. So this year I have 121 things to accomplish, and next year I'll have 122 things. I haven't been the most consistent at this. Long stretches of time where I have them every year, and long stretches of time where I haven't done them. And guess what? The MBA mistake was during a period of time where I was not writing down what I wanted to achieve as an individual. And so my lack of planning resulted in even more career frustration. Enough frustration to lift my head out of the sand and say, where am I going next? So the desire to have or to find a career was eye-openingly hard. I honestly thought like, hey, 12 years delivering software, I was good at my job. I could just, reach out and find another job immediately. Well, that is absolutely not what happened. And not only did I not have the ability to interview well, I never interviewed at that point. Every job I had received prior to that was either what I would call a nepotism thing, where somebody knew somebody and I suddenly had a job, or it was an internal promotion or an internal move. And so I never really had to interview up to that point. I really had no options, because at that point in my career, I had no idea how to actually articulate to other companies what I did for a living. And because I didn't have a professional network, remember me saying I wasn't interested in what other people in my professional life had to say about what I was doing, I stayed at the job that I had for almost another 2 years before I finally took a job, any job, to get away what was an extremely toxic environment at that point. I was still not promoted. I had an unused MBA. I had a lot of essentially school debt as a result of it. And, at that next job, I met somebody who invited me to participate in a professional network. So this came at the exact right moment in my life. My husband and I had recently moved to a new state, and we didn't have many friends. The folks I met in those early years of that professional network actually turned into lifelong friends who I've had for years now. And when I got to my mid-career, I was dealing with my first ever official remote job, and this was before the likes of Zoom or Slack. All I had was a Cisco desk phone and email on my BlackBerry, just to be clear. I also couldn't dial into any of the conference rooms directly because our IT team had no idea how to make that work. And so really most of the calls, most of the meetings that I was meant to be in, I had to wait for people to call me. And you can imagine they oftentimes forgot. And so when I was on the phone, I also found it incredibly hard to follow the conversation. Again, early days of tech, there was really no noise canceling. So if more than one person even slightly talked at the same time, I couldn't understand a darn thing that they said. And I was desperate. I turned to my professional network for help, and that was really the key here. This is when I met Mark Kilby. For those of you who don't know him, he is one of the leading experts in agility for remote work and remote facilitation, and I highly recommend following him and reading anything that that man writes. He is amazingly creative and helped me really understand how to do better at getting connection with people that I didn't see on a day-to-day basis. I will tell you, I was young when I joined this professional network. I didn't know much about what they were talking about. Like Agile was brand new for me. I didn't understand the terms. And honestly, at first I was very closed off to a lot of what they were saying. However, about a year in, something clicked for me. I had lunch with my boss at the time and one of my colleagues that I had met in that network. His name is Bob Galen. Bob is an agile leadership expert who has gone on to do greater things. And at the time, I didn't know if he really knew that I thought of him as a mentor, but some of the things that he has said over the years to me have stayed to me because he was saying them at critical times in my career. He was saying what I needed to hear to challenge me, to make me think differently about what I thought was the right thing for me to do. And honestly, the most important thing he's ever told me was that being a true leader are the ones that actually both observe long enough to see the truth, but also are courageous enough to tell it. And so was this me at the time? It really wasn't, but I aspired to be that way. And in hearing Bob talk about courage and leadership, it made me realize I wanted to be that leader. I wanted to learn how to do the things he was talking about. And I took my first class on leadership skills and facilitations where I learned the skills of active listening and how to ask open questions. These things are critical for everyone on this phone. It doesn't matter what role you have. It doesn't matter where your career is going. Being able to listen to what others are saying and being able to ask open-ended questions to help them talk more about their perspective has been basically the single most impactful thing to my career. And so for the next 3 to 4 years, I spent many hours listening. I went to classes that interested me. I attended meetups. I was always listening. I read so many books. It was shocking that I had that focus. I don't have that focus today. I'm not going to lie. It was something that I reflect back on and think, I don't know how I did that. I learned from the engineers I was working from infra projects to software projects, migrations, upgrades, literally everything you can think of. I have done. And it all came to one simple word when I was thinking about all of the problems that were in front of me, all of the things that were really challenging about the environments I was working in, from back office IT to frontline products being deployed out the door. There was one concept that I didn't hear and say that is utter BS. And just to be clear, at that point, I was about 10 years into the whole agility thing. So I had a lot of BS moments when I was listening, but this one definitely made 100% sense to me. All the challenges I've seen over years, projects, everything, I honestly was like, could this really be a silver bullet? So I wonder actually if anybody can guess what that might be. But in a few short seconds, I'm going to show you anyway, which is, yeah, it was Devops. And honestly, like when I first heard about this, I was working in Red Hat IT at the time. I was definitely in a situation in which it was clear to me that being a Scrum Master in a large IT division inside of an open source software company was probably not a great career path for me. I wanted more than that. And when our CIO at the time had an all hands, so, we were up for the 6-month reorg that we tended to have at Red Hat when I was there. He put up a slide and he said, here's my pillars. And the center pillar was called DevOps. And it was the first time I'd heard the word. I'm just going to be super frank. And I was like, what is that word? So I pulled out my phone and I did a little bit of searching. And I bumped into an article that John Willis wrote. And I started reading. And I think I ignored the rest of the all hands. I don't think I actually heard a word out of anybody's mouth for the next 3 hours as I consumed all of the information that was in the space at the time. I wouldn't say now, knowing what I know after working for 18 months in a team that was trying to solve some of those DevOps related problems, then going through 8 years on the engineering side at Red Hat and now at GitHub, I'm going to tell you, I am not sure whether or not I am an entirely huge fangirl anymore. I think that there's more, and I think that the industry has to do a better job. But at the same time, it was truly transformational for me and changed a lot of the thought process that I had in the way that I was thinking about my career, the people that I was working with, and how to make everybody maybe have a little bit of a better environment, or maybe feel a little bit safer at work to be able to share and tell everybody what their opinion is. And that kind of leads me to today. Because of my interest in that topic and my desire to learn rapidly, I asked probably more questions and learned so much about technology in such a short period of time that this knowledge got me noticed. This ability to speak with authority in public got me noticed. And I mean, like, when I talk about speaking with authority in public, it was more like, hey, I read this really cool thing. I would love to talk to somebody about it. What do you think? That is really what I mean. I don't mean things like, hey, I know more than everybody in the room, and I think this is great, so you should all think it's great. I was actually generally curious about what other people thought. And so I attribute this point in my career to just tiny wee bit of luck. I met Denise Dumas, and for those of you who don't know who she is, at the time she was the VP for Linux engineering at Red Hat, and so she was responsible for a $2.5 billion business, over 800 engineers, and probably one of the most impactful operating systems on the planet, in my opinion. Now, you might disagree with me, but I think so because I worked with a team for 8 years. And it was about 8 or 9 years ago at one of Red Hat's conferences where Denise invited several folks out to dinner, and I somehow got that invitation to join. That was the moment of luck. I geeked out like I am wont to do about the DevOps team I was working with, and I'm sure I was very cute, and I'm sure I was very excited about it, and I'm sure I exhausted everybody at the table with my excitement. However, she surprised me on the way back to the hotel by leaning over and saying what is the most career impactful thing that has ever happened to me in life, which was, you should come and do the stuff that you're doing for IT for me and my teams. And therein lies the point in my career, which I think is very important for all of you to know. Who says no to something like that? Well, I did for about 6 months before I finally hit myself with a clue bat and said yes. So I believe that moment was the moment in my Red Hat career, like it really, my career in open source really began. The thing I will say about this situation, and the thing that I will impress upon you, is that not only was Denise my mentor, she was my sponsor. And that is really important for all of you. You got to say the things you have to say yes to things that scare you, while also making sure that you have a support structure in place to help you with those things. One of those early friends that I had in the Linux team, you may know him, Matt Miller, who is the Fedora project leader, asked me to speak at a conference. And so yet again, another thing that I was really scared to do. And so I was both delighted he asked and terrified he asked. I had sweaty palms leading up to the conference for that 8 months leading up to the conference. And I literally threw up the day before the conference because I had worked myself into such a state of anxiety. And so let's just be clear, my boss went, her boss went, and her boss's boss went to this talk. And I totally bombed. I bombed so bad, it was the worst talk of the conference. But it also provided the best feedback ever, which was, your talk was poop. I kid you not. And I'm really glad that I actually did that, because if I hadn't, I definitely would not be here talking to y'all today. There's another misstep I want to talk about when I made with Denise. And here is another inflection point about being careful about what you say yes to, as well as also being careful about what you say no to. So, about a year into my tenure working with Denise and her teams, she started asking me this really serious question about what I wanted to do long term. And she saw something in me that I frankly didn't see. You know, I'd go back to that sponsorship mentorship comment. And what that topic was is we argued for 9 months over whether I should become a manager or not. My position was, and you might see some threads of the earlier self in me saying, I don't need folks. I am better and I can do more on my own. And I quite frankly didn't learn much from my earlier, you kind of probably need to work with a team to help you lesson. Denise knew better. And she knew that I needed to learn that. And she knew that if I didn't learn it, my career was going to stagnate. And so management was definitely one of those things that scared me. I had literally no idea how to manage people. I was definitely not good at it when I first started. And it was really scary because I was so used to, up to that point, knowing the answer to every question. Like, what do we do next? Oh, here, I got a plan for you. How do we handle this? Oh, no problem. I got a plan for you. And so this was a job that I had never done. And I was working with people who didn't necessarily want to report to a new manager. And so just to be clear, the mistakes I made as that new manager, well, they were frankly disastrous. And so 2 short months of completely messing up, then I was able to regain my footing and start watching, you know, learning what I had or applying what I'd always done by learning from other people, by watching who was around me and what they were doing with their teams and how did they actually get through some of that challenge. And I was amazed, kind of frankly, at the return I received by practicing some of these techniques. I mean, like learning from one of my favorite managers at Red Hat, Paul Friels, who is also deeply involved in the Fedora community. He would do something and I'd be like, that would never work, but let me try it anyway. And I would try it and it would work. And I'd be like, what just happened? And so it didn't really take me very long to recognize the value of that. And as a result, I felt very strongly about investing in others. And let's just be clear, mentorship is a lot of work. It comes in many different forms. It comes in mentorship where you're asking for very tactical advice. So what should I do in this situation? Tell me the script I should say. I've mentored, like in that example, I've mentored people to help them ask for raises for different jobs, to get through a difficult conversation with their friends or family, or even the people that they work with. And I've also, I also mentioned the word sponsorship before. And so, yes, Denise mentored me. Yes, she was my boss, but her support was really about sponsorship and what sponsorship means to me and why it's important and why each one of you should be looking for that sponsor in your career is because she knew where she wanted me to be. She saw something in me that I didn't see, and she knew the types of things that I would need to be able to do in order to fill somebody like her shoes one day. And by doing that, she also knew that she would have to push my name in certain conversations and push for me to have this certain type of opportunities. And so when you are a mentor or a sponsor for somebody, it is a lot of work, but I will tell you the effort pays off. It's not that I'm helping somebody, I'm also learning something at the same time. So just understand it's a two-way street, and it is a very good thing for you to be doing. This effort really has paid off for me. Very early in my career, I participated in a workshop that was meant to teach you good product management skills. One of the games we played was to try to walk through across the room, everybody holding onto everybody else's shoulder in one big blob of people. And it seemed easy enough, but what we learned during that 10-minute exercise about without good communication, no one was going to be able to successfully move forward together. And I took that learning and I brought it into one of the Kubernetes teams that I was working with at the time. And honestly, I have not thought for a single moment about that at that point. But when I was preparing for this presentation, I was actually curious. I reached out to a bunch of my friends, my family, and asked them, what impactful career advice have you heard? And one of those engineers got back to me and he said, hey, you may not remember, insert that exercise that we did. That has been really impactful for me, and it has helped me understand how to be a more impactful engineer. And so the way he phrased it was, bring others along for the ride. Make sure that you are always telling people where you're going, and you don't have to tell them how they should get there, but you should definitely share with them, hey, I think we should be going in this direction. What do you think? And honestly, think about it. If I hadn't found a network of professional colleagues, if I hadn't been curious to learn new techniques, and if I hadn't been teaching others what I knew, if I hadn't been open or confident enough to share what I learned, if I hadn't done any one of the things that I explained to you today, and probably countless that I haven't mentioned or don't even know about, I would definitely not be able to be the person that I am today in order to live my best life and help others understand how to live their best lives. This embodies where I am today, constantly learning from folks, pushing myself to read everything I get my hands on, listening to other people's points of view and asking questions curiously. I am beyond thankful for all of the experience I have earned over the years, and I am beyond thankful for the experience that qualifies me to get to work for GitHub. I have one last piece of advice to share with all of you, and this one came from my sister, and I think it's really important to understand that in order to get to where you want to be, you have to invest in yourself. You have to be deliberate, you have to plan, and you have to use your time wisely. Now more than ever. We all know that what has happened over the past 18 months, past 2 years at this point, is definitely going to have significant career impact for all of us. It's definitely going to have industry impact for all of us. And what I think I know now that I wish I had known when I was in my early 20s is that there is no one on the face of this planet that is going to do it for you. Even Denise didn't really do it for me. She kind of had an idea where she wanted me to be, but where I am today is not what she thought I was going to be doing. So you have to understand where you want to be. You have to plan for it, and you have to do this in a way that shows that you're making incremental progress. You're not going to expect to suddenly one day fall into a role like the role that I have at GitHub. You got to work for it, you got to plan for it, and you got to find the information that's going to help you actually do what you want to do with your career. And so the only thing that I have to say to y'all right now is, why not start now? So Seb, thanks so much for inviting me to speak. And that is the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Jen. I mean, unfortunately, you can't hear everyone applauding, but I don't know whether I don't know whether you spent a lot of time being sick before this talk. I think not, probably, but you definitely didn't bomb. So thank you. Excellent.
Thanks. I did not throw up before this talk, for sure.
So we have a few questions. Tim Denver, you have a question that you'd like to ask. I'm going to enable you to unmute. So if you just unmute yourself and ask a question, please.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, right, you can hear me. Well, look, this question, I don't mean it to sound challenging. We talk about delivering software and in all manner of general terms. I just wondered if you've actually written or designed software yourself.
I have. When I was very young, like super young, as in college days young, I worked on several I guess you behind the scenes web interfaces that were being, like get this, serving the websites of some of your favorite comic book artists. I was working on their websites when I was younger, not just HTML. Good Lord, I did Flash, Flash, I'm so embarrassed. I worked on Flash websites in the very early days. I wrote JavaScript for some of them. I wouldn't say that I actually designed Linux systems. That's definitely a world different space that I was in, but you know, simple systems.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
No worries.
Peter Regulus, let me unmute you so you can ask your question, please. And you will also need to unmute from your end. There you go.
Yeah, hi Jen. I love the talk. What about doing a tech startup? I know there are a big move in the US to do these tech startups. Are there any resources or tips or advices for doing a tech startup? Do I need to do a slide pitch to angels, or is it a long distance marathon run?
You know, I've never been part of a startup. That is something that I can definitely not claim experience doing. And being associated to Silicon Valley now, working for GitHub, I actually, and honestly, just to be entirely clear, I had an opportunity to move to Silicon Valley when I was much younger and work at Google, but I turned them down. And it's primarily because I didn't necessarily enjoy the whole Silicon Valley energy, or the way that folks spoke to one another, or just like the constant go, go, go attitude. I see some of that reflected in the company that I work for today. And honestly, like in terms of startup, the things that I have seen, like I watched Docker, I watched the rise of Docker, I watched the rise of Kubernetes, like all those things that are going to be amazing cash cows later on. Like I watch them from the side, and I oftentimes think, gosh, I wish I was the person with that idea. What I am seeing happen is the things that are successful are the ones that actually have the good idea that is attached to some sort of open source community, or has some sort of developer energy saying, yeah, that's a tool I really want to use. That is what I've seen successful. I really honestly do not know how they wind up going to get funding. I am relatively certain it's somebody knows somebody at some point, or has heard something, or would like to learn more. So I imagine that there are pitch decks and all that kind of stuff, but I've never actually participated in any of them. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much. No worries. I've got a nice handle on it now. Thanks once again.
So Peter actually had a second question, which I will just ask for him since he's gone offline, which is, how would you go about finding a mentor? So you talked about mentors during your talk.
Yeah, sponsorship, you can't really ask somebody to sponsor you. That's kind of like something you just have to let happen. If somebody wants to sponsor you, they will definitely let you know. Mentorship is definitely something you can ask. The thing that I would say is, especially now that I am at a company where I really don't know many people at this point, you've got to first identify what you want to learn. So if there's a part of your organization, or if there's something in the industry that you don't know that you want to know, you probably need to attach yourself to somebody who is viewed as maybe an expert in that space, or maybe has knowledge that you want to know. The bottom line is, like, I straight up ask, hey, do you have time to mentor me for maybe a couple of hours a month? Here are the goals that I want to have. Here's how I think you can help me. The bottom line here is that you're not just simply asking them to mentor you with an open-ended, this is going to go on for years. You're providing them exactly what it is that you need them to help you with. You're telling them it's a fixed event, so you're not going to be engaged with them for years and years and years. And you're telling them about how much of their time that you actually need. I have yet to be told no. And honestly, I think it's just because I always approach it with this is really what I need to learn from you. Can you please help me? And that does take a little bit of humility. So you just kind of have to identify what that is that you need. And once you know, you should be able to look around in the space, like whether it's at work or in a community, to find the person that you think might be able to help you fill that knowledge gap.
One of my colleagues recently was on a coaching course, and they had to find people to mentor. So there'll be people out there that are looking for mentees as well. So even just open social media can sometimes deliver up great men. We've got a question from Oscar Miron. I will unmute you, Oscar. Could you ask your question? You will also need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thanks for your excellent talk. Well, I look for your advice, actually, and I wrote actually on the question that I have an open-ended question, so it's quite open. The answer could be quite open, and the question is, what advice would you give to a person that develop career in a non-IT sector, reaching senior levels, and it is now seeking a new career in IT and has just finished an HND in computing.
Yeah. Similar story for me, Oscar. When I became that first manager in that manager role at that time, I was what would be like a director level project manager at Red Hat. And it was a very hard thing for me to digest, the idea that I would have to start at an associate manager level when I was a manager. You know, that's like entry level management. The thing about this is that sometimes the ego gets in the way of understanding that career change comes with probably pay hit or taking a different perspective on where you are in your career and where you want to be. The other thing I will say too is that you know, like this industry certainly is can be being almost 50 myself and covering the gray hair with the colored hair. Sometimes people don't understand how old I am, but I will tell you that it definitely is a concern to me sometimes when I think about hiring. Like, am I hiring somebody who is doing a career change? And let's just be clear, I'm hiring technical program managers. Many of the people that come through are career changes. They were, I've got a lot of engineers applying for this role. I've got a lot of people who were, you know, probably project managers in the past who have limited technical expertise looking to apply too. And it can be quite frightening for folks to try something new, especially when they have longevity in their careers. I just suggest being patient. I think the thing about it is it's probably going to be problematic to get the attention that you want. I know a lot of people, although I would definitely not do this. I have called people out, not necessarily at GitHub, but definitely at previous companies for hiring, where people dismiss based on like, oh, what's this big career change? Or I think I've also seen the people who have had career gaps where they've not worked for a couple of years and now they're back in it. I've definitely heard comments. So the only thing I could say here is I hold my peers accountable to hiring in a certain way. I hold myself accountable to hiring in a certain way, and I hope that you have success finding a role in where you want to change your career. That's really all the advice I have for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. So at the moment we have no more questions. I'm going to waffle for just 30 seconds or so. If you have a question that you're burning to ask, please type it into the question panel. Otherwise, meanwhile, as I said, I'm going to waffle. Jen, I really enjoyed your talk. I loved the early, mid, late career aspects of it. I'm amazed to think that you worried over a conference talk for 8 months. I think that's a lovely little anecdote, and I hope to see you give many more conference talks. Maybe ones
Thanks,
that you don't just you don't have to rush them out in 30 seconds. It's good to have time to prepare them. We have one other just come in that I'm not going to. I won't put him on voice, but I'll just ask it anyway.
That's fine.
How important is networking to get hired?
It's the single most important thing. There is no more important thing. And honestly, Oscar, when I was talking about your answer, that is actually the key. I don't think I would have this job that I have at GitHub without networking. Knowing people in open source, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, being able to be in the open source community and having name recognition in open source has opened doors for me that I did not think was possible. And so being engaged in a community, and not just showing up for meetups, actually participating, actually getting involved, these are things that make it easier for you to make connections. These are things that make it easier for you to actually find roles. I'm not necessarily thinking that LinkedIn is always a great way to do this. So I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think it's like the personal connection of meeting people and talking to them and finding goals that are aligned. LinkedIn is not necessarily a great place for that, although it doesn't hurt to have a LinkedIn profile so that you can network there. I'm just going to be super, super honest. I know a lot of the very, very public facing open source software experts who are very visible in the communities, who then also are married to certain people who are at GitHub. And when I said I'm interested, then that's when, out of the 1,500 applications that went through on this job, they picked me and said, oh, wait a minute. Okay, out of all of the noise, here is someone we should talk to. That is really important to getting that first conversation, that first ability to demonstrate. It's not going to necessarily land you the job, though, because I could have bombed the interview and they could have definitely said no to me. And I will be clear, I have seen networking work for people to get interviews, certainly in the last 6 months, who did not get the job as a result. So just understand that it's a combination of networking and also being able to answer interview questions in a way that resonates with the person who you're talking to.
That's great advice. There's a couple of people pointing out that the BCS is a great organization for networking. And we have a, oh, right, it's not so much a question. Oh, he says that you have been working for 25 years. How do you see your next 15?
It's a great question, and it's a great closer. Retirement, Tim. I'm planning on retiring. I am planning on closing my career out at GitHub within the next, 3 to 4 years, and finding myself a lovely home somewhere in the mountains and retiring. That's really where I see myself in the next 15 years.
Well,
see if I can do it.
For that, then we're going to miss you when you retire in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
But enjoy your retirement. So thank you everybody for coming along tonight. There'll be another Edinburgh branch BCS talk on the first Wednesday of December, which I hope to see you at. And until then, thanks Jen, and thanks everyone for coming along. Goodbye.